Y'all don't know the absolute oppressive struggle I just went through to set up this camera. How do YouTubers who do this thing in the car, how do y'all do this? This was the most technical shit I've ever had to do in my life. Hi, I'm Sajid. I've been off the internet for a while. I haven't been off the internet, but I've been off YouTube for a hot minute. I made a video a few months ago explaining why that was. It was predominantly because I started a new job and I'm kind of in the final leg of my master's degree still. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not gonna make content until I'm graduated. And then I was like, yeah, first of all, I may take longer to graduate than I expected. And I just don't really want my channel to be dead space while I'm gone. I did post a couple videos since then. I did post my favorite books of 2022. And I posted another video where I vlogged my reading for the first like 4 months of the year. And I will put the link to that above. It is now unlisted, so you can't just find it on my channel, but once you have the link, you could go watch it if you care to watch it. In this video, however, I just wanted to kind of update you all as to what I intend to do with my reading and my channel for the rest of the year. Now with me, you need to take everything with a grain of salt, because I will say that I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna read this book, I'm gonna make these videos, and then it doesn't happen. So I'm at this point, this is just what I want to do, what I would like to do in theory. There are like Shoe fly.
Shoo!
Okay, I don't think that worked. I think the fly is still somewhere in here. And a mosquito and a fly. Like, y'all bitches trying to give me dengue and diseases and shit.
Ew! Get away!
Go, get out. Go be free. There's like food and atmosphere out there. Like, why are you in here? This is like a boring car. Come on. You're almost there. She's almost there, yo. Why are you... Okay, like, it's right, the window is open, like, you could just leave. Right, go, right, be free. Exactly. She's gone, y'all. Alright, what was I here to talk about again? Alright, okay, books, right, okay, so I want to start by making content. I would like to hopefully make 2 videos a week in June, so I'm trying to do like every Tuesday and every Friday, fingers crossed. And yeah, I'm really excited to just kind of be back and to sort of get back into the gist of reading. I haven't really been reading a lot for the year thus far. I only read 8 books, which is fine. I'm okay with that. I want to read more, so I feel like making video content and getting back into watching booktube and making booktube videos will kind of hopefully prompt me to read a little bit more. So this video is really going to serve as a wrap up for the first 8 books that I read for the year. Now I did talk about the first 7 in that vlog video that I linked above. So the first book I actually read for the year was The Jumbie Bird by Khail Khan, and this is a classic that takes place in Port of Spain on Frederick Street, right next to Woodford Square actually. And I went there the other day, by the other day I mean sometime last year, with my friend. We went to the library because the National Library is right there, and I took a picture of this book in Woodford Square, like right next to the Red House, in front of the Red House actually, which is our parliament. And it was really nice to like visit a spot where the book that I'm reading takes place, because not every day you get to do that. You know, so that was actually a really nice kind of like way to sort of appreciate and celebrate this story. I picked this book up because, not just because it's a classic, not just because it's a Trini classic, but because it is also a story that focuses on an Indo-Trinidadian Muslim family. It's a really interesting story that sort of explores a crucial time in Indo-Caribbean history. And I talked about this in the vlog, so I don't want to get too much into it. India was still seen as the homeland, but now Indo-Caribbean people have been in Trinidad and the Caribbean for, at this point, like more than 50 years. So it's this sort of limbo state where the homeland is fading away and the new land is now having to be embraced as where we are and who we are now. I also really appreciated the explorations of ethnicity, like not just being Indo-Caribbean, but being a specific type of Indo-Caribbean person. Like, people from India are not the same, right? We have different ethnicities and stuff. Today, Indo-Caribbean people don't really make much of a distinction about which parts their ancestors came from, but your grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents likely did make those distinctions, you know. And Khail Khan was making that distinction because he was a Pathan and he was very, very proud of it. Now, many of the Indians who came during indentureship were Pathans. Specifically, many of the Muslim Indians who came during indentureship were Pathans. They were descendants of people who came from Afghanistan. I actually have a bit of Pathan heritage on both my maternal grandparents' side, and it's very common for Indo-Caribbean Muslims to find out that they have Pathan heritage. Other than that, the writing in this book was just absolutely phenomenal. Like, Khail Khan has a... not Khail Khan, it's Smith Khan. Smith Khan has a way with his prose. He has this way of just bringing things to life that I really, really enjoyed and appreciated. Jumping from something really classic to something very modern in Trinidadian terms, we have The Dreaming by Andre Bagu, which was actually given to me by the author. He even signed it because he's an absolute sweetheart. He gave me this book and a poetry collection that he wrote as well last year. It was really nice meeting him, and I've met him a few times since then. He's just a really cool guy. So The Dreaming is a collection of short stories that all explore and focus on gay men in Trinidad and Tobago. Most of the stories are set in Port of Spain, but there are stories set throughout the country. It's really interesting because this is like the first piece of queer Caribbean literature that I've read that doesn't really explore the traumas and the consequences of being queer. Most of these stories are about characters navigating difficulties and challenges in their lives, but those challenges don't necessarily come from homophobia and the outside world not accepting them because they're queer. I mean, that is explored and talked about and acknowledged throughout. A lot of the struggles that queer people have are not limited to their family and friends and society at large discriminating against them or not accepting them. It's also about the internal struggles, internalized homophobia, figuring out exactly what your sexuality or what your gender identity is, figuring out relationships, how to navigate relationships when you don't really have a reference, right? When you don't really have something to look to in the wider world to figure out how to have a relationship, a healthy relationship with somebody. They explore those little challenges that you face as queer people that aren't necessarily connected to the bigger oppressive structures. It just felt very refreshing. It brings a keen and different but necessary perspective to queer literature in the Caribbean. Connecting the past with the present, a book that was recently published but set all the way back in the 40s, Hungry Ghost by Kevin Jared Hossein, which is kind of all the rave right now. Like this and Brian McIver's new book, sort of like the two Trini releases of the year that everybody's talking about. I ended up going to the book launch, and it was great. It was a really great experience, and that's why I bought this copy. This is the UK edition, which I think is just absolutely gorgeous and really captures like the moodier undertones of the story a lot better. It takes place, as I said, in 1940s Trinidad, and it's following an Indo-Trinidadian family, a very poor family who live in a barracks consisting of a young boy named Krishna, his mother Shweta, and his father Hans, and they are kind of like the main characters of this story. Hans ends up sort of becoming involved with this very rich but secretive family who are quite dangerous, and he is taking an opportunity from them that he knows will really help his family, but could ultimately put things at risk. So the story is about the family sort of navigating this really new, tricky situation, and it's so good. Like, it's so freaking good. It was so beautifully written. Kevin Jared Hossein, he just has this knack for writing about Trinidad in a way that, you know, he just gets it. He picks up on the nuances of our culture, but he also has this ability, and I say it all the time every time I talk about his books, he has this ability to capture this underlying looming sense of fear that always exists, because we live in a society and in a world that is very corrupt, where you can lose everything in an instant if you do something wrong. He is able to sort of take that feeling and write about it in a way that almost makes it feel like horror. Like, you read his books and sometimes question whether there's going to be some kind of like monster or demon popping up.
Is somebody gonna summon like a demon at some point? Like, what's going on?
But the story is not horror. It's just that he's able to sort of capture the way in which we tell horror stories and apply it to the real fears and the real world that we experience. And I really, really appreciate that about his writing and his storytelling. I just think it's brilliant the way that he does it. My only qualm with this book is something that I'm still trying to figure out, which was there was some changes towards the end of the story that happened that didn't really make sense for the character, and I wondered if that was just a fault of the story or if it was done purposefully to make the readers feel betrayed by the character. There were times where I felt like the story was going to go in a certain direction and it didn't, which is usually a good thing, like an unpredictable story, but I almost felt like it lost trajectory halfway through. I don't know, I'm still sort of figuring out my feelings around how it ended and where we got, but overall I think as a work of literary art, Hungry Ghosts is a really good story either way you take it, so everybody should still read it. I finally got around to reading A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum. It's a book that I've always wanted to read because wow, oh my god. You ever feel lonely and unloved? You need to get a fucking life. Yeah, what was I talking about? Okay, right. A woman is no man. No man, I relate to that. This, what was this about? Right, this was about girl. So she thought she was doing something with this story. I don't know if she did. It's a story about it's a multi-generational story about a Palestinian family. Let's start there. Y'all know I love a I'm a hoe for a multi-generational story. So I was like, okay. And it's really just an exploration of the experiences of the women in the family, the mothers-in-law, daughters-in-law, granddaughters. There are particular ways in which women are oppressed in Arab and Muslim context. And I don't think that it's a bad thing to acknowledge that that is a reality. I don't think that it's a bad thing to acknowledge and challenge and discuss that. And I appreciated too that the author tried to make the separation between Islam and culture. And so she talked about, in the book itself, we're meant to understand that the family, they are not actually very religious Muslims. Rather, they are very stringent with conforming to their traditions as Palestinians. But I just can't help but feel a lot of it was just, I don't want to say exaggerated, but like the worst case scenario of every possible situation in this book is what happened, right? And at some point it just felt like a bit much. So it was just really jarring. And the more I think about this book, the less I like it. Because I did like it when I read it, and the thing is, the only reason I don't finish books I don't like. Y'all know that about me. The only reason why I finished this book is because the story was very compelling, and I enjoyed many aspects of it. Etafram is a brilliant storyteller, and the story itself was compelling. The writing was great. Objectively, it's not a bad book. It's just that I really was uncomfortable with all the abuse, and I still don't know how to feel about that. If you are Arab or if you're Palestinian, and if you have any thoughts on this, I would love to know. Like, if you read this book, like, what are your thoughts? Or even if you haven't read this book, like, what's your thoughts on the conversation or the discussion itself? Let's talk about my last two books. Both of these are kind of speculative-ish stories. This one is translated fiction. It's called The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly by Sunmi Huang. That was translated by, I think, Chi Young Kim. Yes, so this was translated from Korean, and it takes place on a farm, and it's about this chicken, this hen named Sprout, and she's a layer, and her life as a layer is really horrible. She's like in the coop, and it's terrible, and she wants nothing more than to lay her own egg and raise a baby and to live in the barn. So one day she runs away from the coop, tries to go live with the animals in the barn, and they're like,
"Oh, Benjamin, we don't like you. You're a layer. You're supposed to be in the coop or whatever."
And so she ends up having to run away from the barn because they rejected her, and now she's sort of like living on the fringes of society. By the fringes of society, she's living in like the bush, in the forest around the farm itself. And she ends up finding an egg while she's there, and that's sort of where the story kind of takes off. It's very allegorical, and allegorical for what, I don't know, and that's what I like about this story. It can be interpreted in many ways. I had a very queer reading of this personally because she didn't like the life that she was living. She wanted to get out, and when she gets out into the real world, she realizes it's actually not that great. There is a struggle in being a queer person who has to leave your family and your community, because there's a safety net there, but it's also a place in which you're stifled and you can't be yourself. And then you go out into the real world, and you don't necessarily have to stifle yourself, but there's no safety net, right? So it's like you're between a rock and a hard place, and you kind of have to find your own way, create your own path, because there's not a template for somebody like you. That's what this book is about, and that's obviously not just a metaphor for queerness alone. It could be a metaphor for women in general, right? I mean, this was a hen whose life was all about, reproducing. It has Animal Farm vibes, of course, and I wouldn't be surprised if this book was meant to be somewhat of a play on Animal Farm. But it's very different, because whereas Animal Farm was an allegory of the structure of society, systems, economic systems, and was also very particularly based off of a specific historical event, whereas this one, I don't think it's based off any specific historical event. This one focuses more on the individual as opposed to the society or the group, right, as Animal Farm does. So I think this takes the allegorical farm story but explores it in a completely different way, and that's what I really, really liked about this book. This is Lesser Known Monsters of the 21st Century by Kim Fu. This is a collection of really interesting, mostly speculative stories, and the speculativism in it sort of ranges from, I guess you could say, sort of more magical realism, fabulous stuff, to sci-fi dystopian stuff, to stories that were honestly just regular real-life contemporary stories. So there's no consistency to like what the genre of this book is. It just feels like the author had a bunch of different really cool ideas and concepts, and she just put them together in one collection. And that could potentially, because the thing with short story collections is if you don't have something that binds them together, it can feel like a very disjointed collection where the author is just like, I'm gonna throw a bunch of stuff in a book and sell it with a pretty cover. But there was a common thread throughout all of these stories, and for me that was this very underlying unsettling feeling. These stories are meant to kind of explore the ugly parts of being human in a very honest and open and vulnerable way. And no matter what the story was, whether it was a story about a woman falling in love with a sea monster that wasn't really a sea monster, or whether it was a story where humans lose the need to eat food and actually food becomes repulsive, so no one eats anymore and we can survive without food, but there is this intense nostalgia and people really miss food, so the main character does this kind of like underground black market therapy where she reinvokes the feelings that people used to get when they eat their favorite food. Or if you're talking about a story about a time machine where you can go into it and reverse your aging or advance your aging and literally even kill yourself or bring yourself back to life. Or a story about an insomniac who has like sex with the Sandman. These stories are bizarre but incredibly vulnerable and thought-provoking, and I really, really enjoyed this book. It was good. I don't really I forget to give ratings, so A Woman Is No Man was like a 3.5 star read for me. The rest of these were all 4-star reads. Actually, I gave this 5 stars on Goodreads. It hasn't had the lasting impact on me, so I would say it's really more of a 4-star. These were 4 stars. This was also a 5-star on Goodreads, but again, like in hindsight, they're all 4-star reads. I mostly read 4-star reads for the year. I did read 2 non-fiction books. One of them is called How to Think Like an Anthropologist by Matthew Englique. Both of these books were actually lent to me by my friend Keith, who is an anthropologist, because I told him I was really interested in anthropology, so he lends me a bunch of really cool stuff to read. This is a very good introduction to anthropology as a discipline, by talking about some of its main concepts as a discipline. So things like culture, family, all that kind of stuff. Like really, really good exploration of what anthropology is and how it works. And that's something that I really wanted to know, because I always question like exactly what is anthropology. But to understand anthropology is to know its disciplinary emergence and how it is used in the scholarship by anthropologists. So that's what this book is really helpful for. A 4-star read. The other book, also a 4-star read, was Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. I had a lot of thoughts on this book, and I did again go watch the vlog for more thoughts on it. I mostly liked it. It was a great overview of the history of our species, from its very emergence to the current day. And the main thing I liked about this book, my main takeaway, is the fact that we are a species that is constantly creating our reality, whether we are physically creating our realities by building roads, cars, houses, and stuff like that, or whether we are ideologically creating our realities through religion, through politics. I just got a message from my phone basically telling me that maximum recording has been reached, so I'm going to stop this video now. Thank you so much for watching. Please stick around, don't unsubscribe. I'm here, I'll be here, I'll be making videos. Until next time, inshallah, keep reading. Bye.